Hello, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Candidates here on BCTV in partnership with the Commons and the Brattleboro Reformer. I'm Randy Holhut from the Commons, and over the course of the next 2 hours, we'll be hearing from candidates running for the Brattleboro Selectboard. There are 6 candidates running for 2 one-year seats and 2 candidates running for one three-year seat. Melanie Winters from the Reformer and I will be spending the next hour asking questions of the candidates, and we'll take a little break and then transition to asking questions to the 2 candidates running for the 3-year seat.
Okay, the candidates will each have 90 seconds to respond to each question before we move on to the next candidate. And this is a chance for everybody to learn where the candidates stand on the important issues facing our community. We'll make sure that each candidate has a fair opportunity to answer each question. Now, let's meet the candidates for the 2 one-year seats. And first we have Isaac Evans-Franz. And we have Christina Cheonnet. And Amanda Ellis-Thurber. Franz Reichman. Tim Wessel. And Richard Davis. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
We'll jump into the first question, which is, in your opinion, what is the most important issue facing the town, and how would you address it as a member of the Select Board? And of course, 2 of you already have an inside track on that particular question, but we'll begin with you, Isaac.
The biggest issue facing the town of Brattleboro right now is the budget. We're looking at a more than 12% increase in property taxes as the Select Board has advanced, and most of our incomes are not keeping up with this increase. As I've been knocking on doors around town in all of the districts, and this is what I'm hearing from folks here. I was talking to a guy up on Marlborough Avenue the other day as he was getting snow off of his roof, and he came down and he said, you know, we're looking at moving because we can't afford these increasing taxes. So that would be the number one thing that I would say. And in terms of how we address that, I think the Finance Committee has had some really good input on this. The representative town meeting elects the Finance Committee, and they put together a statement that was unanimous that they put out. And I read that at one of the January and one of the February Select Board meetings. And one of the things they talk about is the need for long-term financial planning. So really looking at what are the impact of the decisions that we make this year on future years. And the other thing is to look at, in terms of how do we cut that budget, we really need to look at what's most expensive, where are the biggest opportunities for savings that are going to have the least impact on our town. Thank you.
Christina?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that answer, Isaac. And I would agree that it's the budget, but I'm actually going to go with a different answer, which is that it's the divisiveness in our town, and that it doesn't matter what issues we have in front of us. If we continue to fight each other instead of the issues, we are not going to get anywhere. How I would address that as a Select Board member is in a lot of different ways. The first thing that comes to mind is that I want everyone to feel like they have equal access to the Select Board as the decision-making body, and true access means that you feel welcome when you're there. And I would like to work on the decorum of Select Board meetings just by doing simple, welcoming, kind things when people come and give their comments. And sorry, I saw the yellow card. I would like to, you okay there? Yeah, this is one I'm just not, I'm a strong finisher, but I start off a little rough. So yeah, I think that we really need to realize that things aren't these 2 stark realities, and that most of Brattleboro feels like they're caught in the middle of these 2 extremes. And when we approach every single issue, we can't do it from the way that we've been doing it, where if you feel, okay, I will stop now because I'm sure we'll get into all of that later. Thanks for bearing with me while I warm up over here.
Okay. Amanda?
Would you repeat the question?
Yes, in your opinion, what is the most important issue facing the town, and how would you address it as a member of the Select Board?
So I want to start what I have to say by actually swerving a little and honoring a very important person in our town who we lost a week ago. Gregory Lesh, who was the head of our Chamber of Commerce for over 20 years, close with many of the people here. And I just want to honor his work, his legacy, and how the efforts of the Chamber of Commerce, which is more than just the heartbeat of our business sector of our town, but really reaching out to people, new people coming to the area, people who've been living here for a long time, and the importance of that. So I want to honor that. I agree. My heart hurts with the way we're talking to each other. It's not possible to solve problems. It's not possible to plan for our future when the polarizing, vitriolic nature of our communication is the way it is right now. I see it as a reflection of what's happening in Washington, of a reaction to the authoritarian regime of Donald Trump. And we are starting to all talk like that, and that's just not possible. It's not possible to get along, and it hurts my heart. And I know there are other people in our community that it hurts their heart too, and they want to see us be able to plan for the future, work on the budget, the basic things of government, but also to welcome people into our community. How can we welcome people into our community when we're fighting bitterly? So let's all get off our screens and talk to one another. Thank you.
Okay. And Franz, this is an easy one since you're already on the Select Board. So what is the
I am already on the Select Board. And I guess, it's hard to, as far as the work of the Select Board goes, I think the single most important item is the budget. It's every year, doesn't come and go. And it needs to be done in a way that it's not just the numbers. It's not just, well, it's a 12% tax increase this year, it was 4% last year, or last year it was the school board that went up so much. And all that is true and all that's important. But what's really important is how does the budget relate to what kind of town we're going to have? What life is like in Brattleboro. And then, of course, that draws in a whole lot more than just looking at a set of numbers. And it invites a budget process that every year looks at what are our priorities, what's important for us now to accomplish in real terms, and also what's on the horizon. And the idea that we have to look towards the future, I think, is a very important idea that Isaac brought up. And have this done in a structured way so that every year we know that we're evaluating priorities, we're looking at the long term, and then we use those perspectives to establish the annual budget for the coming year. I think that's the biggest single task that the Select Board has.
Tim?
Thank you, and thank you to the Commons and, of course, BCTV, which helps make all this happen for us. It's really valuable. And I thank you to my fellow candidates mentioning the vitriol. It's been really tough. It continues to be tough for all of us when people are just yelling at each other, whether it's writing, kill cops on a parking meter, or it's insulting and threatening harm to non-binary members of our community. None of it is acceptable, none of it. And so it's, with that atmosphere, it's hard to concentrate on what I think is extremely important, and that is the budget. We agree on that largely, that it's very important on the agenda here. So the budget currently could use, I believe, another person who is a fiscal conservative, a fiscal watchdog. I don't personally lay blame at the feet of the current Select Board on any one particular decision. It was indeed a perfect storm of financial situation with incredibly high expenses, having to deal with a trash issue, just one thing after another. But I believe that if I get on the board, I can hit the ground running because I've served on the board 6 years. I was known to be a fiscal conservative and a fiscal watchdog then, and I'll be that again. I'll be ready to go as soon as I'm elected. Thank you.
And our other incumbent, Richard.
The budget for sure. I mean, it's a quality of life issue, and it stares people in the face every day, and people are afraid that they won't be able to afford their property taxes, and that's a real concern. Now, the select board, the past year, I think we did the best job we could do, but it's still not enough. I mean, 22% down to 12%. 12% is still a hefty increase, and it's a lot. But it was a collaborative effort. The town departments, the town government departments, gave us 58 recommendations for where we could cut the budget. I mean, they did a lot of heavy lifting and they did a lot of homework, and I believe that that's probably the best we could do, because the next step is cutting personnel, and I don't think that's the right way to go, at least not right now. And the other issue that relates to the budget is we have to have more long-term planning. We have to create some kind of template that's going to be practical for us to use for the next 3, 4, or 5 years, even longer, so that we know where we're going.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, we're going to allow the candidates to talk a little bit about themselves. Christina, we're going to start with you. What unique skills will you bring to the board?
Well, I will not take your feedback personally. That might bother you sometimes, but what happens when you take it personally is that you get defensive about it, and I welcome feedback and critiques of how I'm representing you as an elected official, and I actually love hearing from people who disagree with me, and I can almost feel my brain changing and growing as I hear other perspectives and other people's experiences, and I am really excited to have an opportunity, if you elect me, to bring this to the board, this idea that if someone has a different experience than you, it does not invalidate your experience, that we can all disagree and have completely different opinions and experiences and make our decisions stronger because of it. And I'm excited to see more of that.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, what qualifications and unique skills do you bring to the board?
Yeah, so I've been in Brattleboro for 30 years, working with my husband on our diversified organic farm. Being a farmer is brings a cool skill set, especially if we're talking to about budgets. So sometimes you really have to, we have had to deal with shortfalls of money, and we've had to constrict our operations in clever and scrappy ways in order to make do, and to get to the other side for a fruitful and more long-term future. So I think I bring that, and I think that's kind of a unique thing. There aren't any other farmers sitting here, so if you want a farmer on your select board, vote for me. The other thing is, through our farm and my work on the farm, I have the ability to work with young families, work with kids getting their first job, high school students, college students, emerging adults who would love to come back to Brattleboro, would love to have their homes here. But we have this unaffordability piece happening right now where it's almost impossible to get a head start. And it's also on the other side. I work with a lot of people, the seniors as well, who like to buy ice cream from me and tell me how unaffordable it is. So we have a lot of jobs to do. And I think putting me on the select board would be, let's put our heads down, let's get to work, and let's do some problem solving.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Franz, what unique skills do you bring to the board?
I'm fairly certain that I'm the only person up here who's ever done a tracheostomy on anybody. Now, that's not a core select board skill, but when you need it, you need it. So, anyway. Which is to say, my background is as an emergency room doctor. It does bring a particular sort of connection to the community and a window into just how things work for people in a lot of different circumstances. Now, that wasn't in Brattleboro, it was in Keene, but close enough, I guess. As far as actual personal attributes or skills, I think maybe the most directly relevant thing is that I really enjoy talking to people. I've had conversations with a number of people here in the room, and I just finding stuff out, seeing what perspectives people have, hearing different opinions. I like that a lot. It's actually been the most fun part of this job. So in that vein, I'm a little sick of talking about my office hours, but I think it's important. So I will mention once again that twice a week I sit at the Works downtown, and anybody's able to come in and talk to me about any subject they want. It's really been, that's been a lot of fun, and I invite people, even now, to approach me with their thoughts on what's happening with the Select Board. Communication, I think, is a really big part of the job.
Okay, thank you. Tim, you're next. Unique skills.
All right. Well, thank you. I think that my 6 years of experience previously on the board and my 1 year experience being chair of the board in 2020 honed my skills for listening to people, for running meetings in a fair and democratic way, and I think that's would be what I bring the strongest to the board, to be honest. I also have a core memory of this being on the Select Board for so many years. It's that the loudest voices in the room are not always the voices that you need to be listening to. Sometimes you need to find those voices that come to your meetings who are trembling, who are nervous to talk, but they can say things that really get people thinking. And it's important to hear the quieter voices and not just the loud voices in any kind of room, in my opinion. The only other thing I'll say is that, like a lot of folks up here, I'm embedded and invested in this community, all of us up here. Like Christina, I have a young child, I have a 7-year-old, and I also have a 35-year-old. So I have a lot of, did you know that?
Yeah, I knew that.
A lot of experience with how much trouble different ages as a father watching people grow up and be productive members of our society. And I have a red card now, so I'm going to be quiet.
Thank you, Tim. And Richard, on to you.
Well, I think that one of the qualities that I bring to the Select Board and hope to continue to do is to help with consensus building, and I've always operated that way my entire adult life. I've lived in this area for 46 years, in Brattleboro for 3.5, and all of that time I have been involved in human service agencies in one way or another. 20 years ago, Darrell Pillsbury and I founded the Windham County Heat Fund. We've raised over $1 million in that period of time. I've also created 2 other nonprofits, and they were very successful at what they did. I think that being able to use common sense to weigh very carefully the needs of the community against the community's ability to pay for what people want is a difficult task, and it's a skill, or you call it whatever you want, but we have to do that. And I believe that I've been operating in that vein since I've been on the Select Board.
Thank you, Richard.
Isaac, don't forget Isaac.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I would welcome the opportunity to serve with any of the folks that you've just heard from. The skill that I bring is one of bringing people together, groups of people and individuals, for policy change that make our lives better. I've done that nationally, organizing libertarians, progressives, conservatives, liberals, to come together for policies that we've gotten through a divided Congress for peace and prosperity. And that's the intention that I bring to this work as well. And over the last several weeks, I've been talking with folks who are from all parts of Brattleboro, now all sorts of experiences. Today I was at a place where folks are getting resources like hot meals and clothing and other goods, folks who are struggling, bringing together people in the community. Yesterday I was talking to business owners, a couple of days before that, going up and down Main Street. And I want to hear from people, and I go out of my way to ask people questions and to learn about their concerns. I also, this isn't a skill, but it's just my deep commitment to the people of Brattleboro. I think I'm the only candidate up here who is born at Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, graduated at Brattleboro Union High School, and then decided to come back to this community a few years ago. Thank you.
Okay, now that you're all warmed up, time for the tough ones. We got 3 budget questions here, since all of you have said the budget is the most important thing. Let's begin. The Select Board recommended budget that Representative Town Meeting will be hearing in March resulted in, as you've mentioned, a 12.1% tax increase. What do you think contributed to this outcome, and what, if anything, would you have done differently? And we'll begin with Amanda.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for beginning with me. Yes, I appreciate the Select Board brought it down from 22% to 12.1%, the spending. I'm going to say trash. Trash was the bugaboo this year. I'm not satisfied with the trash. I will say, if you elect me as Select Board, I'd like to revisit the trash issue. We, as you know, may know or not know, Casella Waste Management is now our trash contractor. They were the only people who submitted a bid, and they had us over a barrel, as I think Richard Davis said, with really no choice. I would like to revisit that and see if we can cut costs in some way there. Perhaps there's another hauler out there. Maybe we can annex West Brattleboro and we all bring our stuff to the dump. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, so getting creative about it. And the other budget increase was obviously our need for more police officers. And I know that's upset a lot of people who are concerned about our general fund using revolving loan fund money for that. That decision, I think, met the moment. I don't think it has to necessarily be in the long term, but right now, a fully staffed police force was important for our town.
Okay, Franz is one of the people who were present at the creation.
So the proposed budget for fiscal year 26. Just to factually answer the question of what were the components in the proposed tax increase that the budget necessitates, there were, I would say 5 different things that accounted for most of it. One is that our revenues actually went down from FY25 to FY26. So that, outside of the property tax revenues. So that means that even if we spent the exact same amount year over year, that the tax rate was going to have to go up to cover the fact that the other revenues were going down. So there's one ingredient. The other 4 things were on the expenditure side, which were the trash collection that's been referred to, the additional expenses on the police force, the healthcare premiums for the town employees that we have virtually no control over, and also the pre-existing salary contracts that had been negotiated both with unions and with non-union employees. What would I have done differently? It's hard to come up with really good quantitative statements about, well, we should have done this or we should have done that. What I think we should have done differently was to look at more options on things. Not so much trash. That's actually one place where we did look at options. But I think we could have looked at ways to augment the community safety downtown with perhaps less expenditure. There's a lot more that could be said about this.
I'll bet Tim is going to say it.
You know me well. Well, actually, Amanda and Franz did a good job at sort of laying out the ground and the land we all live on right now. The one thing I would add with a big underlying highlighter right now is to say that it's a fact that 67% about of our entire budget is staffing, okay? And I think it's honestly irresponsible to make any statements that suggest that we're not looking at staff cuts within the mix of looking to lower our budgets. I'm not going to say, oh, this staff has to go, this should be combined. But there are ways to go about this where you need to be looking at staffing because, as with what was mentioned with healthcare and the cost of literally carrying all of these employees is tough, and it's a huge strain on our budget for the expenditures. I also think that there can be quite a bit more work done in the area of trying to raise the revenue bar. When I was on the board, I was one of the key people to push forward the 1% local option tax. You all remember, if you have some town memory, that it was not popular at the time, and it squeaked by in town meeting, in representative town meeting. But I think most will agree that having over $1 million revenue that is not coming from property taxes is a valuable thing for our town. Thanks.
And Richard?
Well, the trash system that we have agreed to put in place has cost an increase of 8% in the overall budget. But we were living in a fantasy world for the last few years because we didn't have any increases, and we didn't have, when they put it out to bid, we only had one company offer to try to do the trash for us. So we didn't have a lot of choice there other than try to set up our own trash company, and we're not in New York City. I don't think it's a realistic thing to do. The other thing that bothers me about the budget is the amount of expenditure for personnel in the police department. I think we could have compromised a little more and still maintain the safety that a lot of people want to have and that we need. I think we could have done better without maybe 3 positions. And the thing that worries me even more is that because the staffing at the police department is going to be at a higher level, that's going to affect the budget for years to come. And it's going to be very difficult. And then the final thing is that a lot of the things that cause our budget to increase, we have no control over. How much does a truck cost? How much are repairs, parts for things? And who knows how bad that's going to get in the coming months and years. That could have a major impact on how towns all over the country operate.
I had the opportunity to speak with some folks who were at the select board meetings last September and who had spoken out in support of the downtown safety action plan that the police department put forward in increasing the number of police officers significantly. And some of those folks who had supported those increases have confidentially said to me, I didn't realize it was going to increase the taxes so much. And I'm wondering, could we do this incrementally? We have the Brattleboro Resource Assistant Team, the BRAT officers. I just chatted with them on the way up here in the municipal building. And, I'm interested in seeing how that works. It's 4 new officers who are going to be based downtown. And when I got a chance to do a ride around with an officer just last week and see the work that the police department is doing, but I do agree with some of those folks who had supported these increases in the department and thinking about, okay, so we're creating new positions that when we haven't even filled the existing positions in the past. So I think we need to look comprehensively, like some of the others here have said, at okay, what are the biggest expenses? There's been attention on that 2% of the budget for human services, but that leaves 98%, which is most of the expense.
And Christina.
Sorry to ask, but do you mind repeating the question?
Well, that's the select board recommended budget for a town meeting in March is going to be resulting in a 12.1% tax increase. And what do you think contributed to this? And what, if anything, would you have done differently had you made the budget?
Yeah, so there's the actual line items that contributed to that increase, and there's also some process decisions that contributed to that increase. I think that we need to look at every year's budget with not only the 5-year long-term plan right there in context, but also the 25-year capital budget in context, and the trash expense and the downtown safety action plan expense are both things that really should not have caught the town by surprise. The crime levels have been rising for years. This was not something that came this year out of nowhere. And the trash contract was expiring. In fact, they extended this expense 6 months. Oh boy, the yellow card's already up. Yeah, so much to say about the budget. But as a current finance committee member, I have a little too much to say about the budget. So in 10 seconds or less, I will make a commitment to rigorous process and facing these challenging moments by actually facing them, as opposed to deferring costs just so we are in the same exact situation during the next budget, or relying on non-recurring revenues that also just put us in the same exact place next budget season.
Okay, that's actually a good segue into our next question. The next question. The Select Board reduced property taxes by using the unassigned fund balance or surplus, the Special Projects Fund, the Revolving Loan Fund, and passed fees onto residents. Do you agree with this strategy? And we're going to start this one with a incumbent, Franz.
No.
And why is that?
Why is that? Let's expand on that.
Well, using non-recurring sources of funding for recurring expenses is a really bad idea. I don't want to say that it can never be done, but you can't rely on it, because it puts you in the exact same position the next year where you've still got the expenses and you don't have the money to pay for them. So I think you do have to kind of bite the bullet when you're facing hard times. The process which Richard described before, where we looked at 50 or 60 different ways to cut the budget, a lot of those to me were a little gimmicky. And I would have preferred a deeper look at questions of, I think the big question is, can we get along without this? And that's the question that we didn't ask, going through in a comprehensive fashion. Not whether we like it or whether it's good or people are doing a good job, but can we get along without this? And if you don't ask that question, you're not going to be able to make the substantial budget cuts that will carry you through into future years. Our lack of a future perspective, I think, is what really hurt us in that regard.
Okay. Tim.
Yeah, so I think I'd largely agree with your initial answer, which is no. I'm not too comfortable with using what's meant to be literally a rainy day fund for emergencies for using an expense that's going to be recurring. But that also depends on the board working together to really decide what is an appropriate use for such reserves. There's a balance there, because we don't really have the mandate to hold people's tax money for just any purpose whatsoever. So when I was on the board for 6 years, I did argue over and over again for that rainy day fund to not be too large, because I didn't feel like the town should be a bank that is holding the money of the taxpayers. It should be used if it's being taken at all. So the better method is to have that rainy day fund, have it be modest for what you need, that is actual emergencies that do happen during natural events and things like that. But also recognize that it's all of our money, it's taxpayers' money, and it's just not something to be assumed. It should not be taken from the taxpayers if it's not really needed.
Richard.
No. I think that it's not good accounting practice, and it's not good fiscal responsibility to take money out of a fund, a rainy day fund. Certainly, there are times when you need to do that. Emergencies come up. I mean, Irene, things like that, you have no control over, and I think that would be more of an appropriate thing. To me, it's sort of like digging a hole and throwing the dirt over your shoulder, and it's the same hole, and you keep digging it, and you're not making a lot of progress. So I think that this is an area where common sense has to prevail, and that's what I've been trying to say since I've been on the board, is that if it doesn't smell right, there may be something wrong, and I think that my common sense meter tells me that we shouldn't be doing that kind of shuffling of funds unless it's absolutely critical for the functioning of the town and for preserving safety in people's lives.
Thank you, Richard. Isaac.
So the board voted 5-0 in favor of this budget, which included, based on what you've described, with taking funds from these accounts, these funds, the rainy day funds. So I do agree with everybody who's spoken so far tonight that that's not sustainable to be taking funds to pay for ongoing expenses. And we can see what's going on with our federal government right now, that we can't count on that sort of support. Like we really aren't going to be able to depend on the federal government to show up the way that we maybe have in the past. I'm thinking of a couple of years ago with the flooding, the storms, and I'm really grateful for the town of Brattleboro working with the state over many years, and planning was a big part of it to get that, the whetstone, the flood mitigation work that was done. So and those sorts of investments are so important, but we do need to have reserves for when catastrophe and the climate crisis is real, and we're going to be seeing increased extreme weather events. And as the federal government, its decisions coming out of Washington, that's affecting people in this town, and we have 400 people living in Brattleboro who are unhoused, and we need to be prepared for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina.
So my answer would also be no. And the unassigned fund balance, otherwise known as the rainy day fund, otherwise known as the emergency fund, it does come with a guideline adopted by the Selectboard, I think in 2011. I could be mixing up my dates, but it specifically says that these funds should not be used for ongoing recurring expenses unless there are extraordinary circumstances. So like I answered the last question, I think that the safety in our downtown area, it didn't change drastically overnight. It had been a problem for years. So that I don't feel is a good enough excuse to have an extraordinary circumstance when we all saw what was happening downtown, and we have so many different people have been saying this needs to be addressed. I don't think there was anybody who wasn't noticing a difference. And the revolving loan fund could be used for actually giving loans to our residents who might want to open up a pop-up shop or start a small affordable business. And the idea is that they would pay those loans back. It's a revolving loan fund. So using a chunk of it to set up a substation for the police department, we won't be seeing that money back. So it's going to, our revolving loan fund just won't exist eventually. And then we won't have that opportunity to invest in local businesses.
Okay, Amanda.
Yeah, I don't think that it's fiscally prudent to draw down reserve funds like we've been doing. Our revolving loan fund is now down to $615,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. In fiscal year 2024, it was $1,800,050. It was over 1.8 million. So we have been. The collection, there was the 7.7 thousand for the substation, the 450,000 for the trash carts, and 80,000 to support a second year grant for the Chamber of Commerce and Downtown Business Alliance, which I think that 80,000 kind of goes into the original goal of the revolving loan fund. So economic development loans to make our downtown more prosperous, more healthy, create economic opportunity. So if I get elected to select board, yeah, we wouldn't do that again. We need to get scrappier and ask like what Franz said. Can we do without in order to stabilize our excessive spending, which was based on need. But so I don't mean to. I'm not knocking you.
You can.
All right, that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Amanda.
All right, now that we've established about rating the revolving funds, the next question would be, how would you raise additional revenue to lessen the tax burden on property taxpayers? And Tim, you can begin with that. Since
Well, I mentioned the the town has enterprise funds, one of which is our parking fund. That has not been going well for raising revenue outside of property taxes, but it is one of the few ways that the state allows towns to generate revenue outside of property taxes. One simple thing that I would look at immediately if I was elected to the board is this idea of running the 1% local option tax. Most people think of that tax as something, and it's wonderful because it actually gets onto every Amazon purchase that you make from the town of Brattleboro is now taxed at 7%. So the town of Brattleboro gets 2/3 of that penny on every dollar. We could take all of that according to state rules if we decide that it's to our benefit to do that. So you have to build a department that would handle that paperwork. But since it's getting near the range of $400,000 a year, every year, that 1/3, it could be something to look at, because certainly you can staff a position for less than $400,000. So you'd be adding some revenue to the town. Another thing to look at is what's known as pilots. They're not really called pilots in municipal parlance, I think, in Vermont. But that's payment in lieu of taxes, and that's asking properties that do not currently pay taxes for whatever reason to make a share each year into the town fund.
Richard?
Well, ever since I've been on the board, I've been trying to rack my brain to figure out how we can increase revenue, and it's certainly a difficult issue because it doesn't happen very often, and it's difficult. I think our grand list really needs some kind of boost. It's very low. One area that I think we could significantly help the budget and increase revenue is this idea that's been thrown around that Brattleboro is a hub town, and people from Windham County come to Brattleboro and use all our services. And it's been brought up by other select board members. It wasn't my idea, but I like the idea is that we should ask the state to pass some kind of legislation to compensate a hub town like Brattleboro for being a hub town and for incurring all the costs that we do. And I think, that recognition hasn't been there, and I think it needs to happen. I think it's very important. I think the other thing is, and this may not seem like a big revenue thing, but I think that if we boost the recreational opportunities in Brattleboro, if we increase trails, if we increase every kind of recreational activity, It'll draw people to town. They want to move here. They'll think Brattleboro, okay, we got a good arts town, but we also have a good recreation town. And recreation, I believe, is an economic development tool that hasn't been used very well.
I'd like to see us leverage resources that we already have in this community to develop our local economy. We have the Small Business Assistance Program, where the town will lend $10,000 to $70,000 for a term of 5 to 10 years with a low interest rate to small or current or prospective businesses. That's an awesome opportunity that we could advertise better. There's the Root Social Justice Center, which is doing economic empowerment work and wealth building for BIPOC community members, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. That's really important work that we can be uplifting. And I'm also interested in the work that folks like Chloe Leary at Winston Prouty Center are doing to expand housing, mixed income housing, so that we can grow our tax base and we'll also have places for people to live, since we're hundreds of units short. And we have a labor shortage in Vermont, so people need a place to live.
Christina?
Yes. So the revenues, the RTM Finance Committee is actually looking into how much loss of revenue is affecting our tax increases. And there'll be an interesting analysis on that in our report that is written for your town meeting reps, but every resident is welcome to read it. And I suggest you do if you're interested. It is about 30 pages, but you will understand more than you ever asked to. And one thing that I've always thought about for revenues is as much as we don't want to do this, potentially raising the costs of some of our services for non-residents. It's already a little bit higher than residents have to pay, for example, for the pool or for summer camps. But considering residents are paying a great deal in property taxes or even as renters, I don't think it's unfair to ask non-residents to pay more than just $1 more to use the pool. I did appreciate one of the select board members' suggestion this budget season to start licensing cats, not just dogs, but cats. And I think the response on the board was kind of a chuckle, but that's the creativity that we need to consider. And my time's up.
Amanda?
Yeah. Raising revenue. I'm the last person to go. Everybody's got great ideas.
No.
Hey.
Oh, sorry.
Somewhat.
Sorry. I'm a little joking ugly I'm going here. Yes, growing the grand list. I love the idea of publicizing more the town programs we have for small business loans. Fostering Brattleboro and maybe changing some of our rules so that startups can be a great place to start up a business. We are not super business friendly. The 1% that we have in town is a deterrent, I gotta say, but we're doing it. It's great, brings in revenue. I think some of our licenses, like our business license, is very modest that you pay to, enroll in a business. However, you're also obligated to, if you have a business, there's personal property tax that goes in with every business. So if you have a depreciable asset that's more than $5,000, you have to pay tax on that, which is actually probably really complicated for the assessor's office. So I'm curious about some of our licensing fees. Can we make them more streamlined? Can they just bring money into the budget without really hassling our business owners? So I pivoted that. Your turn.
Thank you. Well, I'm surprised nobody's brought up the obvious solution, which is to double the creamy tax here in town.
I thought it was pickleball tax.
Now, you see, this is what we need. We need brainstorming. We need new thinking. I'm not very optimistic on this subject at all. What can town government do to increase revenues. I mean, I don't know whether the more apt analogy is taking in each other's laundry or rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. But there's really, what we would need to raise significant new revenue is actions by other people outside of town government. If it's revenue sharing, we need action by our state legislators to make that happen. If it's new businesses, we need entrepreneurs. We need people with investment capital to come here. If it's just fairness, economic fairness, then we need some billionaires to tax and have them pay their fair share. So there's a lot of things that could be done, but I don't know how town government can do it. Now, probably there are ways we could do things better, whether it's through permitting or zoning. We've actually done most of the zoning thing that's needed. So I'm not saying there's nothing that can be done, but it's all kind of indirect, second-level actions that we would take. Hopefully some new businesses coming to town are really what would make a difference.
Okay, next question is related to the community conduct ordinance. There is a question on the March 4th ballot asking voters if they'd like the Select Board to adopt an acceptable community conduct ordinance. A similar ordinance was rescinded at a special town meeting in December. Do you think the ordinance should be revisited? And if so, what do you think an ordinance will accomplish? And we're going to start with you, Richard.
Well, I don't think it should be rescinded. I originally wasn't in favor of it, and I'm still not completely in favor of it. And the way I look at the ordinance is that it's a tool that we could use later on down the road if we needed such a tool. But I don't think we've reached the point where that kind of tool is necessary. I think we've done quite a bit in terms of the safety program in Brattleboro and downtown especially. And if public comment and sort of a feel for the community has any weight, it sounds like people really feel safer in Brattleboro. So I feel like we have some things in place. We need to let them play out because a lot of that, the fear, the lessening of fear was sort of in the wintertime when crime was a lot less. And I think the real test will be when spring and summer comes, and then we'll see if the new plan really does work. So I think the ordinance should just be on the back burner.
Thank you. Isaac.
No, I think it's time for us to move on. The representative town meeting, who voters elected, made a decision, and the select board then decided to put this back on the ballot. It's like if you don't get your way, you then have another vote until you get your way. It didn't seem quite right to me. But there is a problem with safety in this town, and in knocking on doors, I've heard so many people talk about the drug trafficking that's happening in their neighborhoods, and that's, to me, the bigger issue that we need to be tackling. And we need to make sure that residents, neighbors, tenants, landlords, that they have the tools that they need in order to get rid of drug trafficking in their buildings. And one of those things is a state policy change that's needed. I've talked to Representative Ian Goodnow and others, folks who are property managers, neighbors, about the difficulties that you could have someone who's visiting a building. There could be 20 different apartment buildings there, and we have seniors and people with disabilities who are being really terrorized. They're not comfortable going outside their apartments because of trafficking that's happening in another residence. And it's not necessarily the tenant that's the problem. It could be somebody who's outside and taking advantage of that tenant. But unless all the tenants agree, they can't get rid of the trafficking very easily.
Thank you. Christina.
Thank you, Isaac, for bringing those issues up, that they are real and serious, and I know that our police department is working hard on those, but it is a struggle, and I would like to see more focus on those issues rather than what the behavior ordinance was addressing. And no, I do not think that we need to revisit that. And it's Yeah, the ordinance. It's a little concerning to me that that something so vague is on our ballot as voters, where the one place where we are a decision-making body just as residents. It's just a survey question, and a very vague survey question. And as you just asked us tonight in this forum, the question was, a similar ordinance was rescinded, but there is no ordinance on our ballot on March 4th. It's the idea of an ordinance is on our ballot. So when voters go to decide whether they would like an idea of an ordinance, that's all it is. That doesn't give us any information about what the people in Brattleboro would want in an ordinance. Would they want their town manager to be the person who decides who has access to public property or not? And that was a major part of the ordinance that was very creative. And this is an area where I don't think we need creativity. We do not need to recreate the criminal justice system. We can deal with its flaws and make it better, but not add a new flawed thing that we need to make better.
Thank you. Amanda.
I mean, I think the issue of the ordinance has continued on, and I can hear the sort of collective of, we're still talking about the ordinance. The original ordinance was flawed. I agree 100% with that, and I applaud the movement that you started. Because it really got everyone thinking about it more critically. I did vote for it in the special representative town meeting, and I think the general consensus at that moment, at that special representative town meeting, was Brattleboro is awake, and guess what? Representative town meeting actually isn't necessarily the entire town. In fact, it's only a fraction of it. So let's survey the town through Australian ballot in our March 4th election, and let's see what's on people's mind. A non-binding, as you said, information for the future select board. That would correct the flaws. It could be that, people say no to both of them, and then that's information. If yes, then we go from there. So that's what I think.
Okay, Franz.
I've been supporting the ordinance right along in its original form, and I think that there were some questions that needed to be answered, and that's what we're trying to do by breaking it into two pieces. The one piece addressing general conduct in the community, the other piece addressing properties where there are continuing problems of exactly the type that Isaac brought up. Drug dealers that we can't get rid of. How do they interact with the property owners, and what can we as a town do to affect that interaction? So I think there's a lot that's good in both halves of the ordinance, although there may be some reworking that's appropriate as well. I think it's entirely appropriate for these things to be on the ballot. I don't think you can stop your democratic process at a certain point when you get the result that you want, which is the ordinance was rescinded, and then say, oh, it's anti-democratic to take it any further. If it's anti-democratic to do that, then it would be anti-democratic to take it to town meeting after the Selectboard has duly passed it. I'm in favor of more democracy, not less, so let's see what the people of the town think about the two separate parts of the ordinance and how we might go about really making a difference for the downtown. What that difference would be, I don't have time to explain right now, but I think it would be a positive difference for all of us.
Thank you. And Tim.
Thanks. Well, I supported the ordinance. I thought it was some creative thinking by the select board and addressed a lot of problems. We don't know if it would have worked quite the way they envisioned. Part of the problem with that is that it's been pretty much canceled, so there's no opportunity to learn from it. Ordinances are easier to change after the fact than scrap and remake from scratch. However, you know, when you serve on the select board, you learn very quickly that you have fights, and sometimes you lose those fights, and then you move forward. You learn from those experiences, and the select board will listen to that experience with what happened to their ordinance at RTM, and hopefully you get a team partnership. You know, Isaac likes to talk about bringing people together. So that would be my attitude too. It always has been my attitude that you take the loss and you're still on the team. You still move forward and you try to solve the problem. The big problem for me is that we have a state that does not support our town with criminal behavior. So this was a creative solution. We have a catch and release. That phrase is not a negative phrase. It's literally what happens out there. Too often, criminal behavior is not punished. And sometimes there are bad things that occur and people need to be punished. It's just the plain language that we should be speaking. That's what they were trying to address. So it should come back in a better form, perhaps, that with more partners with input. Thank you.
And we'll wrap up the questioning with something that's pretty close to a closing statement, except it's not quite. And you'll also be allowed to give you the contact information for the viewers to, if they want to reach you and have any more questions. But the question is from a reader: what distinguishes you from the other candidates, or why should I vote for you? And we'll begin with Isaac. Why should I vote for you?
We need a mix of perspectives on our select board. And I would encourage folks to think about voting for some candidates that would bring a bit of younger energy, fresh perspective onto the board. I bring the perspective of somebody who was born and raised here and decided to come back because I love this community. I love the sense of community that we have here, the neighborliness. I was looking at this data from the Secretary of State. There's virtually no other state that has the degree of engagement from neighbors talking to neighbors about political challenges, coming together to help each other out. And that's a spirit that I'm going to bring forward when you elect me to the Brattleboro Select Board.
And how can people reach you?
You can find my website is isaacforvermont.com. That's ISAAC. And you can also email me at team@isaacforvermont.com.
Christina.
Thank you. You should definitely vote for me. Let's see. I used to be a high school special ed teacher, and I have a gift to make things accessible and understandable to everybody. I ask questions. I think one thing is that if you see people up here and we all have a lot of the same answers, what really might differentiate you on a decision-making board is that you can get your point across and you can make it clearly. And that is something that I have had to learn to do. It does stand out to me when the incumbents are speaking up here about things that they think are important that we have not seen on the board. And then that makes me wonder, well, what piece was missing? And I think that is part of it, is the ability to work together and to make sure that we're not dividing our town down the middle. So much of that is just simply not true. If you are opposed to the ordinance, it does not mean you are opposed to the police department. You can fully support the police department and support the ordinance. If you are opposed to the budget, it also doesn't mean that you are opposed to town staff. And that is something that I think I can bring to the select board to really bring two sides together. And I also am not here with a stance. I'm here with an ear to listen. When you elect people on the select board that already have their minds made up about the issues, that's what can make residents feel unheard. And I'm here to tell you that I hear you. I also see a red card, so I'm going to stop. Thanks.
Well, just tell people how they can reach you.
www.votechristina.com, and there is no H in Christina.
Amanda.
I'm going to start with the end of the question. You can reach me by emailing me at amandaforvermont@gmail.com. You can also follow my Instagram at amandaforvermont. In the summertime, you can find me on my farm at the Creamy Stand, and you can catch me doing the work there. Why should you vote for me? I'm an open-minded leader. I believe that work is good for people, and I'm a worker. I'm a worker with my hands. I'm a worker in the community, and you can trust me to do the work on the select board and stay in communication with you. You can trust me. I am completely authentic, and I've got a great sense of humor. And I love Brattleboro, and I have hope for Brattleboro, and I believe in Brattleboro's future. And I want my, say, emerging adult kids, their friends, their connections they've made out in the country, in the world, to come back to Brattleboro, to enrich Brattleboro, and to bring as much love to Brattleboro as Brattleboro's given to them.
And we know that we can see you at the works, but where else can people get a hold of you?
Well, I am going to be more specific about my presence at the works. It's Wednesdays from 4:30 to 6:30, Friday mornings from 8 to 10. All I got to do is stop by, and I'm sitting there, and come and talk to me. So that's one way to reach me. You can also reach me through the town website. I think for us incumbents, it's easier because all you got to do is go to brattleboro.gov and go to the select board page, and there's all kinds of ways to get in touch with me. You could also go to Franz's select board page on Facebook and read all the nasty comments that fly around. So, why should people vote for me? I think I'm pretty authentic. I know that I'm gluten-free and I'm 100% organic except for my fillings. So I don't know if that matches your criteria or not, Amanda. But I've got a lot of relevant experience, 2 years on the board, 5 years on the finance committee, active in local politics for a long, long time. But the big thing is really communication skills, the ability to get ideas across, absorb ideas, and the willingness to take the time to listen to people and evaluate and think about what they have to say. And use that to make a difference. So those are the attributes that I bring to this situation. Oh, also, I'm not the oldest candidate up here.
Jim?
Well, thanks, Randy. I hope people will appreciate the 6 years of experience being on the Brattleboro Select Board already, my leadership chops that I have as being chair, during 2020. But more importantly, I've been using this phrase, radical centrism. And it's important to me because it represents following the middle way. I think the middle way in politics in in-town municipal government is the way you make progress. It's the way you should sit if you want to have a mandate from the people. The people, as the vitriol that was mentioned earlier in this program, can be avoided if we keep our ears open and our eyes open to alternatives. You'll hear from me if I'm elected the phrase, I don't know, but I'll try to find out about that. You'll also hear, I was wrong, because sometimes I'm wrong. So that's just the way it is. I feel like I really want people to trust that I'm going to do my best. And once I'm on the board, I'll have much more answers than because I've been away 2 years. So I really feel like I shouldn't be criticizing individual actions. But I think if people look at my past record, they can feel pretty confident that I'm going to act on their behalf.
And how can people reach you?
Thanks. So my email, which is becoming more and more for me a safe space, given the vitriol and in the in the social media world is brattleborotim@gmail.com. You have to be able to spell Brattleboro, but otherwise that's pretty easy. Email is probably best at this point. Thanks.
And Richard.
Well, I'll repeat what I've said all night. I believe I have a good degree of common sense that I have been able to operationalize my whole life. And that includes learning how to balance things. Because I think being in government, and even on this level, it is about balance, and it's about common sense balance. So, and you know, what you see is what you get. This is who I am, you know, and I put it all out there. And all my life, you know, I've spent 25 years in Montpelier as a healthcare lobbyist for single payer. And I prided myself on stirring the pot and making things uncomfortable for people. And I think, not in a negative, not in a bad way, but in a political way where you get the best out of everybody. And you do that in a collegial way. But it can be difficult sometimes. And as Tim said, you have to know when to say that you're wrong. And that's very important. So that's it. Well, you see, this is me. So, okay, vote. And rbdav@comcast.net and through the Brattleboro Town Government website. And also, I'll be happy to talk to anybody on, you know, on the phone, 802-579-9267.
Thank you for sitting in with us tonight, and we're going to now take a 5-minute intermission to switch over to the 3-year candidates. So stick around, and we'll be back in 5.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And welcome back to Meet the Candidates from local media partners, the Commons, the Brattleboro Reformer, and BCTV. Before the break, we heard from the 6 candidates who are running for the 2 one-year seats on the Select Board. And now we're going to turn our attention to the 2 candidates who are running for the 3-year seat on the board. And they are Jill Stahl-Tyler and Oscar Heller. And we're going to be doing the same questions that we gave to 3-year candidates, so we're not going to crush you up with anything you haven't heard before. And we'll begin with the first question. So,
Okay. I think I'm going to start with this one.
okay.
We're going to start with just an introduction of yourself. What unique skills will you bring to the board? Jill, we're going to start with you.
So thank you for hosting. Good to be with you guys tonight. I'm glad we could be here with Oscar. Feels like a little congenial group when there's only the 2 of us. So the skills that I bring are, for quite a while, I've been involved in some sort of a leadership of organization. I guess I kind of started young. So always the school board comes up. I was a school board chair for 5 years, on the school board for 8 years. I think our budget was $18 or $20 million, so not that far off of the town budget. Also part of the leadership team in whatever I seem to get involved with, and from garden club to working with fundraising in the schools to lacrosse pasta parties at our house and all sorts of fun things going through the years with the kids. Professionally, I've been a small business owner for 35 years. I still have my own business, which is in international dairy training, which is actually a thing. And also full-time as executive director for a local nonprofit community house, which is about 50 to 52 employees and works with children with special needs and emotional skills. So I feel like I bring a wealth of commitment to Brattleboro and personal experience in managing budgets and organization.
Okay, thank you, Jill. And Oscar.
Thank you. And thank you to you guys for doing this and for everyone who's watching at home. I'm looking forward to chatting and answering some questions. A little bit about me. My name's Oscar Heller. I live on Elliott Street by the park. I'm the town meeting rep. Something that I think is important about my background is that I've been serving on the town finance committee for the last 6 years, including this year as chair. And that's a committee that I joined actually on the recommendation of Franz, who you just heard from. But I joined it very intentionally, not because I love working with budgets or anything like that. I don't think there are that many people that do, but because I really wanted to learn how the town worked. I knew I wanted to contribute and to be involved, and I got the advice that it was a great place, a great way to learn everything about the town, and I think that's been true. So I think we have specifically budget problems this year. I think the Finance Committee experience will be very helpful there. But in general, I think I've put in a lot of work to try to understand how the town works and figure out how I can best contribute and help all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So now you can get philosophical here about the next question, which is, what is the most important issue facing the town and how you would address it as a member of the Select Board? And you can begin, Oscar.
Great, thank you. Well, it will come as no surprise now that I think the most important issue today is the budget. I think it is not an exaggeration to say that we faced a budget crisis this past winter. And in my opinion, based on the way some decisions were made by the board, I regretfully think that we are going to be looking at a very similar problem next fall, this fall in 2025, when we start building next year's budget. So I think that whoever is elected, the number one job they will have to work on, the number one problem they will have to solve in this year will be the budget, one way or another, whatever the approach is. But I'm hoping that that will be something that we work on for a year. We put some better processes in place. We come up with a plan for how to move forward, figure out what level we want the budget to be at and how to get there. And then that's a job that we sort of finish. We put things into good shape and then we move on, because there are so many more things to think about in Brattleboro than just the budget. This is a problem facing us that we need to work on, but beyond that, there are all the other realms of what town government can do, which I'm sure we'll be talking about in more questions as we go. But yeah, for this year, for 2025, it's the budget for me. Thank you.
Jill?
So I'm going to twist that just a little bit. I believe, yes, the budget's important. I really appreciate the work that the Finance Committee has done and all of their very long and detailed report with a lot of recommendations that are really specific. From that, though, I'd like to say that our real problem is vision. And I think there's two roles that the school board does also, the Select Board does. That is to bring town finances into shape so that we can deliver what we need to for a town and the services that we value, but then also figure out how we get there and lead. And right now I feel like we're having a lot of discussions, rightly so. I'm not sure if I would use the term crisis. We're able to pay our budgets, or with the budget we have, we're able to pay what we need. We have some great ideas going forward, and I think we've had the crisis that I might have said is a safety crisis, because if we have a downtown where nobody wants to come, we're not going to have a town anymore. So to me, that was a larger crisis. The Select Board has made some decisions. They've pulled some money, and they're making a decision on how to move that forward. And now we got to figure out where we're going to go next and how we're going to deal with these issues. So to me, it's a vision question to deal with the budget and to deal with what our town is going to be.
Okay, thank you. We're going to continue with the budget theme. We're going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty here. The Select Board recommended a budget that Representative Town Meeting will be discussing in March results in a 12.1% tax increase. What do you think contributed to this outcome, and what, if anything, would you do differently? Joe, start with you.
So the specifics of that, if anybody just watched, I mean, they've covered it. The incumbents that are sitting here were covering that really well. It's not, there's no real great surprises. The trash was, yes, foreseeable, but not completely foreseable. It's something that we're going to have to deal with. I think there's some creative thoughts out there that I've heard in the community that we can look at. But in general, we're going to need to be a town that's more than just a community. It is a community, and it's more than just taxes and more than just thinking of how can we decrease everything that's going on. We need to put our priorities out there and then just keep going forward. I would look specifically at ways of decreasing costs and prioritizing services, find the efficiencies that are surely there and some redundancies, particularly as there's attrition. Look at every single staff position. Plan, just like the Finance Committee is recommending. I think we need to look further forward. Review our reserves. There's right now a recommendation of 10%. Do we really need 10%? Do we need less? Have that discussion in a really public way. And then I really want to know our town costs for stuff that's very specific so that we can say that to, for example, the state, this is what it's costing us when we're doing the motel program. This is what it's costing us every time we go out with a Narcan overdose and what we're doing with our services here.
Thank you. Oscar.
Thank you. I want to bounce off of something Jill said in her previous answer quickly because I think it gets at something really important. Jill said that she doesn't feel there's a budget crisis because we're able to pay for everything that we're doing. And one of the things that makes town budgeting way harder than, when I do my own personal budgeting is that the town budget always balances because whatever you put in under expenses, you have some miscellaneous revenues and then everything else gets made up out of the property tax. That's just sort of how it works. I personally would describe the fact that we were even faced with the possibility of a 22% property tax increase. I would describe that as a budget crisis. I think the fact that we were able to get it down to 12 in some creative ways that I'm not personally wild about, and the fact that those cuts and deferrals may come back to us in 6 months in the next budget, I think we have a real problem on our hands. So that's that part of it. The thing I want to talk about specifically with budgeting in my last yellow 30 seconds is the problem with planning. For me, I think you can make an argument about should the budget be here, should it be there? There isn't really a magic number. Should it be 25 million? Should it be 23? You can't just go in an economics textbook and get that answer. But if you ever have a situation where a select board opens up their book on budget day, sees a 22% increase, and then is visibly startled by it and surprised and dismayed, you have had a failure of long-term strategic planning and things need to change. Thank you.
Well, speaking of planning, the select board, with the budget that's going to be considered in March, you reduce property taxes by using the rainy day funds, such as the unassigned fund balance, the special project fund, and the resolving loan fund, and pass increased fees on to residents and non-residents. And again, as this one-year candidates thrashed about, what do you agree with? Do you agree with the strategy that was taken, and what would you do differently? And we'll start with you, Jill.
No,
Oscar gets that one.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think you heard from the one-year candidates, everyone more or less saying no. I'm also going to say no. I was at those meetings. I was upset about those decisions at the time. We're writing our finance committee report right now and making, it's a pretty politically diverse committee, I would say. There is some substantial frustration across that spectrum about how some of those decisions were made. I think it's not the most responsible way to handle things. If you go down the list of the cuts that the select board approved, if we want to talk specifics, you will find an overwhelming pattern of, let's put this off until next year, let's pay this off out of fund X, Y, or Z, or is this something we can just not think about right now? And the reality is some deferrals are meaningful. If you put off a new hire and say, and you can just keep putting that off, right? And then you've kind of saved that money and you haven't actually made that expense. But if you're putting off road repairs and you're putting off roof repairs, these are things that are going to come back with a vengeance, possibly worse than if you had fixed them in a timely fashion. The other thing is, of course, the use of these funds. I think anyone knows, let's say something happens at my job and I'm only making 3/4 what I was before. If I decide I can't afford to live in my apartment, I move and I find a cheaper apartment. I don't say, oh, I have money in my savings account. I think everyone knows that that's just not a good policy. So I was really disappointed with those decisions, and they're not things I would look to do if I'm on the board. Thank you.
Jill?
So repeat exactly what you want me to answer. 'Cause
Well,
we're going all over here.
of the decision by the select board to reduce property taxes by using the unassigned loan fund, which balanced the surplus, the special projects fund, and the revolving loan fund, and passing fees on to residents to help cut the impact down to 12.1%. And is that a strategy you agree with, or would you approach it differently?
So I think we were in, they've called it a perfect storm, I believe was the term that one of the incumbents used. I think that's true. And so are we going to be in that exact same position next year? I don't think so. Many of the things that happened are not going to be repeating in that same way. There's not a surprise of trash being that much. There's not, hopefully, health insurance won't be jumping by that much, although it may. So I can't disagree with anything that Oscar's saying, that we need to plan, that it's not a good idea to be sucking down from the funds there. Absolutely agree. I also think it's valuable for us as a town to revisit the whole conversation of exactly how much we want in the rainy day fund, and then make a plan and go for it. Is 10% the number that we definitely want? And I know that was the number that was come up with several years ago, 10, 15 years ago. Is it still the right number? Have we researched that lately? Is it the number that we need to go back to? And we'll get there and figure out how we're going to get there and keep going forward. So it's not a strategy that works really well for very long-term planning. It could be argued, and it could be a question that the town is going to have some input on right now with a ballot question. We were in a crisis situation, which I don't even like this word crisis, but the only time I'm going to use it is the crisis situation of downtown and what we saw. And when you get to the point where people are no longer wanting to come downtown, and we get to the point where we don't have a town, if people don't want to be here anymore, we have to look at what we're going to do.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to stay with the budget theme for another question here. There has been a lot of talk about reducing the human services budget to find cost savings. Are there other parts of the budget that should be looked at for savings? Jill.
So yes, somebody pointed out quite correctly, 2% versus 98% of the budget. Obviously, you have to look. Pretty much any business, any entity is going to look at it, and the first thing is your personnel cost and your staff cost and your benefit cost. Contract negotiations are coming up, and that'll have to be looked at just like it's being looked at by every single business around. The health insurance increases were as high as 22%, depending on which plan your business might be providing to the employees. Health insurance is a killer, and we need to do everything we can as a select board and as a town to speak up and try to get that under control, but that's a statewide problem that needs to be addressed. Every time staff leave, every time we are looking at positions, yes, we have to look at positions. I also hear what the board was saying, and not just quickly saying, okay, we're going to cut staff immediately across the board, but it is something we have to look at and see what makes sense. Revisit which ones are our priorities. But then to me, the answer comes more on the seeking more revenue and figuring out more on the revenue. We can talk about decreasing costs and tightening belts, and we do have to do that, but a vision takes us somewhere further and doesn't just look at the decreasing. It looks at what else we can do so that we can become a more viable town.
Okay, thank you. And on to you, Oscar.
Yes, thank you. I think it's actually a great opportunity for me because I have read headlines. The Finance Committee released a statement, and I've said things at select board meetings, and I've seen headlines that say things like, Finance Committee says cut staff. That's not really how I feel or what I was trying to say. But I think the board made a mistake. They directed the town manager in no uncertain language, bring us a list of cuts, do not bring us anything that will result in a reduction of staff, for various reasons, which I agree with to different degrees, but which range to the degree of it is immoral to consider cutting someone's job because it's their livelihood. I have a huge respect for town staff. I'm friendly with many of them personally. I'm asking them questions all the time on the Finance Committee. I do not for 1 minute think that there is dead wood on the town staff that needs to be cut or that there are easy cuts to make. But the select board said in unison when they got that budget, this is too high. We need to bring this down. And if you decide that something has to come down, you have to do it sustainably. Otherwise, you're not really doing it. So we have to have those hard conversations and ask ourselves as a town, it gets back to vision. What do we need? What do we want? What do we feel like we can afford? And then it's just a question of prioritization. There are no easy cuts, but that conversation has to happen if we're going to have a mature, thoughtful conversation about affordability in our town. Thank you.
The board, we've been hearing a lot of talk about downtown, and the board's been focusing a lot on the various issues downtown. But what have you been hearing about people who live outside of downtown Brattleboro? And what problems are they experiencing? And how do you think town government can support their needs? And I guess you're up.
Oh, this is a new question.
I'd like to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. That's a great question. And I really appreciate it because it does, I mean, I live 2 blocks from downtown, but it's still, it kind of hurts me to hear when the focus is always on downtown. Downtown business is the engine of the economy and et cetera. There is a lot of really excellent stuff going on in Brattleboro, and much of it does not happen in downtown. As far as specific problems, people aren't seeing the same things that they see downtown. I don't think there's the concentration of poverty or the concentration of sort of low-level crime and visible drug problems. But the affordability problems are hitting people everywhere. I think people who live further from downtown deal with very different problems. I mean, I was driving around today trying to get between Route 30 and West River Road, and you go down some of those dirt roads in between there, it is a mudslide. So that is something I've never had to deal with as someone who lives 2 blocks from downtown. But, you know, we have gravel roads in town that can't be maintained in the same way during winter, to take a simple example. And then, of course, services are very different for people in those areas. And I think if I can pull out one specific, I have heard secondhand and haven't been able to verify yet, but that the town has, in fact, moved ahead with cuts to its funding of the mover. And I still need to track this down and figure it out because I remember the board specifically not cutting that at their meeting, but that's something that would drastically affect people who live in more outlying areas. And I hope it's not true, and if it is true, that we can reverse it. So thank you.
Jill.
So problems that people have outside of downtown, I think we need to focus on the whole town when we talk about downtown problems. So people in West Brattleboro, we have our own little commons actually, but we have a bunch of businesses in that corridor as well, that they could have great expansion in that area. That's an area that has a lot of traffic going up, particularly at this time of year. And I think they would love to feel the same support that we've been talking about for downtown and bolstering their economy and helping focus and get people out there. I'm hopeful we can do this relentless focus on no empty storefronts, not just in the downtown, but in Putney Road and on Route 9 going out and every part of Brattleboro. All of us that live in this community are still going to come back to the downtown and feel like that's the source of pride. I know that people, for example, on Ames Hill that have our neighbors right up the road have had problems getting people to come to their farm stand and their overnight that they host on their farm. And when they went downtown, because they had people feel like they were unsafe and not welcomed in the town. So the economy, for those of us on the outlying part, also gets directly affected by what goes on downtown.
Okay.
And the last one you get.
Yes, we're going to wrap this up. You are going to get a chance now to make another pitch for yourself. What distinguishes you from the other candidate? Why should they vote for you? And let people know how they can contact you. Jill.
So how to contact me is, my website is probably the easiest, and it's just www.jillstahltyler.com. And I guess the reasons that I think you should vote for me are really threefold. I have 3 main reasons that I'm running, and one is the select board's administration rules or role that they have. And I feel like I have that experience in forming a budget and working in organizations and knowing where to go and what to look at and having a vision to lead forward. And that second piece to me is the vision. And we need to look and look more than just decreasing and have pride again in our town. We could be seeking out revenue. We could be working with the state to control soaring education and healthcare costs. We have the ability to focus relentlessly on those storefronts that I talked about, small town grants, and investing in infrastructure and looking forward at what would make our town be a beacon, working with other towns around us so that we could be calling them, saying, yeah, we've got something going on, you've got something going on, how can we promote that together? And really being creative about how we promote what we have that's just so beautiful here in our natural setting and the environment that we have. And then my third reason for running has become a lot clearer to me as gone through this campaign process in the last 6-8 weeks. I'd like to focus us on collaboration instead of confrontation. And the divisiveness that we see in the town is really painful and difficult for us to all feel proud and to go forward and to be a town together. So I have several ideas specifically. I'm not fighting for anything. I'm not going to run around talking about crises, but I'd like to bring us together and make politics boring.
Oscar.
Thank you. I think I've talked a little bit about my experience and the ways in which I think it could be valuable to the town. But I want to talk about something else instead, which is that I've worked really hard throughout my life to build the skills of being someone who can work well with other people, who can get along with people, with someone even when I disagree with them. I've, through my businesses and through my involvement in town politics, I've worked with a lot of people in this community, and I would urge you to seek them out. I don't think you'll have to go too far to find somebody who's worked with me on something. And I hope that they will say what I believe to be true about myself, which is that I'm an open-minded person who really believes in the power of working together and coming together as a community to tackle these big problems. So I just want to reassure and you know, Jill, I'm completely with you on the problems dividing our town right now. And sometimes people have a real difference of opinion and it's time to have a fight. But I think things have gone a little past that point, and there's a great deal of common ground that we all share, even politically, that I think if we could all take a step back, we would recognize. I mean, this is a liberal town in a liberal state in a country that's being torn in some very disturbing directions right now. It is a real shame for us to be fighting this hard with each other. So that's something I'm going to work very hard to not have happen if I'm on the board. And then for contact info, probably the easiest way is just my website, oscarheller.com. There's a contact form on there. I'm also on Facebook. You can look me up by name. And really, I encourage anyone listening, please get in touch, send me an email. I will totally get coffee with you or get a beer with you. Let me know what you think. That's my favorite part of doing this, really. Thank you.
And with that, we wrap up tonight's program. And thank you.
Sincere thank you. Yeah, there we go.
To all the candidates who took the time to be with us tonight. And the recording of this live stream is going to be available immediately on Brattleboro Community Television's YouTube page. And it will be up on their website, and it will be broadcasting and broadcasting and broadcasting some more on Comcast channels 1078 and 1079 in the coming days before Election Day.
And just as a quick reminder, Election Day is Tuesday, March 4th. Voting in Brattleboro will take place at the American Legion on Linden Street from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you and good night.